This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by the good folks over at Dipstick Vapes, makers of the innovative Dipper Vaporizer, which can be used as either a standalone pack-and-go vape pen or with a quick switch out for a vapor tip atomizer used directly on concentrates as though it were some kind of magic vape straw. You can forget the butane and blowtorches when you have a dipper in hand. And right now you can save 15% off the already affordable cost of the dipper when you use the discount code MJToday upon checkout over at dipstickvapes.com. That's discount code MJToday over at dipstickvapes.com. And don't forget, when you use that discount code, Dipstick Vapes will donate the amount of money that you saved directly to our friends at Students for Sensible Drug Policy, the most effective agents of change in the world of drug policy reform. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Wednesday, May 31st, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 258 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day brings us down to Florida, where Governor Rick Scott said yesterday that he was still undecided on whether or not to call a special legislative session to allow state lawmakers to finish the work of passing medical marijuana legislation. Regular listeners should remember my reporting on this over the past month or so, with the state legislature wrapping up official business for the year without passing any kind of medical marijuana reform measures as mandated by voters in the fall. During a stop in Fort Myers yesterday, Governor Scott said that his office was reviewing the idea of calling back a special session. Under state law, there are three options for calling such a session, with the governor holding one of the levers of power. The other two mechanisms can be triggered by a vote by state legislators at large or through a joint motion by State House Speaker Richard Corcoran and Senate President Joe Negrin. With as much commotion that's been raised on this issue in Florida, it's hard to see how a special session won't be called one way or another, but we'll keep an eye out in the meantime. Speaking of special legislative sessions to address unfinished marijuana policy, the state of Vermont is dealing with a similar situation after Governor Phil Scott vetoed a bill that would have legalized the home grow, possession, sharing, and use of small amounts of adult use marijuana. While vetoing the measure, the governor attached a letter laying out the changes that he'd need to see in order to sign off on any revised bill. But as Vermont Public Radio is reporting, the prospects for that happening during Vermont's planned special summer session isn't 100% in the face of opposition from Republican lawmakers. Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Sears, one of the leading lawmakers in the state pushing for marijuana reform, said he's afraid parliamentary maneuvering by Republicans could scuttle any chances during the short two-day session. This is a good one to swing over for the full read. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com and on our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily. Vice News has a good story up about the more than $100 million windfall the state of Colorado has realized from the taxation of legal marijuana sales and the plans they have for spending it. On Friday, Governor John Hickenlooper signed a budget bill that directs the state on how to spend the $105 million pulled in via sales tax on legal marijuana. Of that total, $15 million will go to help fund housing programs for people experiencing homelessness, $7 million towards programs to divert people with mental health issues away from jail, and the state's Department of Health will get just under $10 million to pay for substance abuse programs for schools. Swing over to Vice News for all the details on this one. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, Dipstick Vapes, makers of the innovative Dipper Vaporizer, the dual-function consumption device that gives you the power to consume your concentrates and extracts however you want. You can use the Dipper like a traditional pack-and-go vape pen, or with a quick switch out for a vapor tip atomizer, use it to vaporize concentrates directly like it was some kind of magic vape straw. When you have the Dipper in your consumption toolkit, you're pretty much ready for anything. You're like a cannabis inspector gadget, a veritable marijuana MacGyver. Save 15% off the price of the already affordable Dipper Vaporizer today by swinging over to dipstickvapes.com and using the discount code MJToday. That's dipstickvapes.com, discount code MJToday. All right, time for the blitz. Late last week, a proposed state Senate bill up for consideration in the Nevada State Assembly that would have allowed for businesses to allow their customers to consume marijuana was effectively killed for this legislative session. The measure was introduced by industry-friendly lawmaker State Senator Tick Stegerblom and admittedly faced slim prospects even if it did pass the Assembly, with Governor Brian Sandoval being no friend of marijuana reform. The Associated Press has a good story up about the conundrum faced by legal and registered medical marijuana patients in Georgia with actually getting medical marijuana. Even though the state has a program that allows for patients in need to become certified, there isn't actually any way for those patients to get their medicine. I reported recently on the story of State Representative and Republican Alan Peake, who made headlines for taking the step of importing CBD cannabis oil to distribute for free to patients. But that's not really a solution for the state. This is an interesting story that we'll keep watching. The Associated Press is having a good marijuana news day because they also published a great roundup of the various states that are offering or considering offering some kind of incentive to ensure racial diversity among their medical and adult use marijuana business communities. If that's something that's of interest to you, and it should be, swing over to WCVB for the full read. Leafly has another piece that you need to dive into fully with a comprehensive story about federal prosecutor Steve Cook, who is credited as the hard ass behind the Department of Justice's recently announced new policy to impose mandatory minimum sentences more widely and to seek out the charges that would bring the most jail time against any given defendant. Mr. Cook worked closely with Attorney General Jeff Sessions to craft the policy and is someone that should be on all our radars, what with him being an old-school drug warrior with enormous amounts of federal power. There's a headline out of California that I'm reporting on because it's a nice example of how the world should work. On Monday, the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office was called after a marijuana cultivator reported that 4 men had apparently walked onto his farm and stolen 20 pounds of drying marijuana. The legal cannabis farmer didn't go after the 4 men with a gun himself or throw his hands up in resignation. Instead, he called the authorities, who responded properly. The police were unable to find the 4 men, but the fact remains that they tried. That's the world we want to build everywhere. Marijuana.com is reporting that according to a new report put out by Washington State, the sales of marijuana concentrates has grown to encompass more than 20% of all legal marijuana products sold in the state. The analysis was run using sales data from the state and found that while traditional marijuana flower still dominates the market, its share of overall sales is steadily slipping against concentrates. And finally for today, some great news out of Philadelphia, where a 72-year-old grandmother who lost her car and her home after her son was arrested for selling less than $200 worth of marijuana out of it was on the receiving end of a good ruling by the state Supreme Court. 72-year-old Elizabeth Young was hit with a civil assets forfeiture claim by the city of Philadelphia after her son's run-in with the police. Late last week, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled on the side of Miss Young, who's been fighting since 2009 to overturn the forfeiture. Civil assets forfeiture is a terrible vestige of the war on drugs and needs to die everywhere it sees the light of day. Swing over to Forbes for the full read on this one. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow morning with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, Dipstick Vapes, makers of the innovative Dipper Vaporizer, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website, mjtodaydaily.com, and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today.
One take, Shay. One take.